it is my honor to introduce our next speaker, who will explore more deeply on raising consciousness, the inner transformation essential for restoring harmony between humanity and the universe. So our main speaker today has been doing a lot of research on this topic, and he has great insights to share. So if you can help me welcome up Dr. Glen Rein, who will be speaking on energetic mechanisms associated with raising a consciousness. Thank you, Dr. Rein.
Okay, so in light of the previous conversation about shifting consciousness and transforming consciousness, I want to use a different word, and that's raise consciousness. And basically, I'd like to discuss how what happens in the body and in the mind when we do raise our consciousness. And the obvious way to do that, of course, is through meditation. But here's my contact information for anybody who wants to follow up. Happy to answer further questions. Okay. Okay. So there's my information again, unhidden. But hiding is a great word because consciousness is hidden from the body, and I want to talk about the relationship between the physical, chemical body and the energetic body, which I use as a synonym for consciousness. But I'm going to start with since we've been talking a lot of about Hindu philosophy and Shiva and Shakti. This is a model describing the multiple layers energetic layers that exist between the body and God within. On the left, entitled "The Creator" or "The Source," and as you can see, this is based on Kashmir Shaivism, which has actually 34 different levels, energetic levels between the physical body and God within, and you can see that the mind is about halfway up that scale. So the mind is obviously a key method of accessing our higher realities and our source consciousness and our soul. The point I want to make here is that there's two directions that energy information can flow, either up or down. And one is called involution and one is called evolution. And basically, I'm going to talk about both, but particularly involution, because in order to raise our consciousness, I believe we have to bring in divine energy into our bodies, into our consciousness. In fact, in Eastern traditions, in Kashmir Shaivism at least, they describe consciousness as all of these levels that are depicted here. So consciousness is not just in the mind. Consciousness is the entire spectrum of energies. And now energies, not physical body. So we have the physical body there, but the physical body, actually, I'm correcting myself. They would consider the physical body as part of consciousness as well. So that's a quick summary. This is another slide with the same thing. And these kind of slides are basically put together by what's called the mystery schools, at least in America. And but nonetheless, I want to bring in the science to combine it with the mystery schools. So here I want to define nature as the primordial energy of the universe, which I think one of our speakers has already mentioned in the introduction. So I have 4 questions here. How do we connect to this divine energy? How can we resonate with this divine energy? To what extent do we resonate with it? And can we bring our consciousness up into this higher dimensional reality? And are we able to absorb this kind of energy into our physical bodies? And if I can answer any one of these questions, it would be a major achievement, but I'm going to try to answer them all. And the way I view the energetic nature of reality is described here in terms of layers of consciousness, a bit like David Bohm's model here. And the explicit order would be the physical, and the three energy levels that I've depicted here would be the implicate order. And I use this model normally to describe the relationship between a healer and a healee, to say how energy is transferred at all these different levels. But the same model that I use for healing can also be used to describe nature and the relationship between the individual and nature, because nature has all of these levels, energetic levels, as well as the human body. So what we're talking about is a resonance and ultimately a flow of information from consciousness or source or God within out into the physical by virtue of the quantum energy level and the electromagnetic level energy levels. So this requires what I call transduction of energy, and which Dr. Scott Jordan talked about energy transformation. It's the same idea. So here is that concept in a little more detail. Scalar energy is a form of electromagnetic energy. The audience may not be aware of that. It's kind of a higher order electromagnetic energy than electromagnetics. We know that the physical body is very much linked to the electromagnetic fields in the body, because the body is electrochemical in nature, and electrical energy and electromagnetic energy are really what makes the body run. But I'm proposing here that there's a hierarchy of many levels, 34 according to Kashmir Shaivism, that have to be down converted into less subtle, more dense energies until we get into the electromagnetic domain, which is the domain that the physical body relates to, understands, and responds to. So, having said all that, these different levels and different energies have been described by many different systems. I mean, even in ancient China, they talk about the five elements. In the New Age, we use that term loosely. We have the second column, where we have the astral plane and things and causal planes, and then there's been several books written, particularly by J.J. Hertog, called "The Keys of Enoch." Enoch was some kind of a god, shall we say, maybe small g, not big G, who described 5 different energy levels. And in Indian philosophy, we have 5 different koshas. So these are more words to describe what I've already described in more detail. So as I said in my introduction, for me, the $1 million question is, how do you get 5-dimensional energies, higher dimensional energies, all the way up to God, into our body? And as I said earlier, meditation is the obvious way, but people who meditate often have a teacher. And if the guru or the teacher has a higher energy, then they can transmit that into our body and raise our energy from the electromagnetic domain, which it normally functions, into the higher order energies. And we can also do that by ourselves. We don't need an external guru to do that, but that's one way to do it. We can do that through sound and chanting. We can do and sacred music, which is in a Western science approach, has been described in the context of Fibonacci frequencies and solfeggio frequencies that make up the music. We can also raise our consciousness by looking at mandalas, which is obviously a technique that's used in India, because the energy coming off of these sacred geometric patterns can actually help raise our consciousness. We can also do this through ingesting food and water that have been imbued with these higher forms of energy. So, okay, that's an overview of how we can raise our energies. So let's talk a little bit more about the down conversion process, because as I said in my introduction, we've got higher dimensional energies which have to be brought down into the electromagnetic domain in order for the body to be able to understand and relate to it. And I'm going to talk about three different mechanisms, how this occurs through the catenoid, the toroid, and a wormhole, which is a geometric structure that actually can convert higher dimensional reality into lower dimensional energies. Phase conjugation is another concept in physics that also allows us to convert a laser, which is ordinary light, admittedly with quantum properties, into higher forms of light energy. And that process occurs both ways. So it can go from higher dimensional energies into lower energies and vice versa. And the idea of sacred geometric networks and grids, which have information of their own and can also be used to help raise our consciousness. Okay, so if we look in a little more detail about, I mean, I could probably spend the whole half an hour just on that one slide. But so let's look at direct versus indirect kind of energy down conversion. And the way I look at all this is that the biofield, or the energy of the body, is what resonates with the other energies, the higher forms of energy that I've been mentioning. And the the biofield itself is composed of all the energies that I described in my model much earlier in this talk. So the biofield contains electromagnetic energy for sure, but it also contains quantum energy and divine energy. It's all there. So then the question is, how do we, in order to convert four-dimensional energy, electromagnetic energy, into higher forms of energy, we need to bring in the 5D energy into the body. So that's one way to do it. Now, the other way to do it is through physical, well, I'm sorry. So two things going on here. It's the energies of the body that have to be raised into the higher order, higher dimensional energy of divine energy. But these kind of changes also can occur in the physical body, in the electrochemical body, by virtue of phase transitions. And this is a key concept, which allows me as a scientist to talk about how the phase shift can occur. And in fact, new phases can appear in the physical body. And in the physics literature, they have this really fascinating description called hidden order transitions. Now this is a kind of phase transition where a new order is created, and that this order, like David Bohm talked about, implicate order, but this new order cannot be measured by conventional science and is therefore called hidden. So in summary, we have physical chemical changes going on in the physical body and energetic changes. Now I'm going to shift and focus mostly on the energetic side of the equation, although I am a biochemist by training. I think that the energetic changes are more fundamental and important. So here's another model that I've developed where the energy comes in the crown. This is divine energy that comes into the crown, goes down the Sushumna, which is a term used in the Indian philosophy. And the Sushumna is a channel down the center of the spine. And the energy can travel up and down this central channel, and that when it reaches the coccyx, it kind of splits and goes up the Ida and Pingala, which is also described in the Hindu philosophy, and that as this energy goes up the Ida and Pingala back up to the crown, it radiates kind of a subtle energy, whether we call it five-dimensional energy, virtual energy, scalar energy, or quantum energy. These are subtle forms of energy which allows the electromagnetic component to become higher order. Okay, and when that happens, we create what's called the light body. Okay, so mechanisms. Let's look exactly about how that can actually happen. And so we're going to start with wormholes because, believe it or not, transversible wormholes is a concept that's in the physics literature. Transversible meaning that you can travel through the wormhole from one end to the other. And this is actually also described as hypersurfaces in Riemann curvatures, which is a concept in physics. But the concept I want to focus on is the catenoid, because the catenoid, as you can see in the picture here, is the center of a wormhole, which is actually a toroid. And in the physics literature, they talk about the mouth, the throat of the wormhole, which is an interesting concept because that's where the energy first comes in. And they describe it in the physics literature as negative energy, a bit like Dirac used that term. So these basic fundamental concepts are in the physics literature. And here's a depiction of a catenoid inside of a toroid, in the center of a toroid, which I'm proposing can actually down convert divine energy into ordinary electromagnetic energy, which I'm calling here 4-dimensional, 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time. And here is a depiction of the toroid with the catenoid. And it turns out, so this is in the physics literature, it turns out in the biology literature, the concept of, the shape of a toroid, certain biomolecules take on the shape of a toroid, in specific DNA. And there are electron micrographs published in the biological literature showing toroid DNA in the shape of a toroid. It's also called supercoiled DNA. And I guess the problem that I have is with biologists is they don't know the function of the toroidal DNA. So although they describe here in this particular reference from 2009, the fact that there is a cascade of transitions between different toroidal states. So not only can the toroid itself convert one kind of energy into another, it itself undergoes transitions from one type of toroid to another. And yes, I said all this. So here in the bottom left, there's actually an electron microscope photograph of two toroidal DNA molecules connected by a single strand or a double strand of DNA. And in my model, I'm proposing that this toroidal DNA can function to actually down convert divine energy into usable electromagnetic energy. Okay, so, and this was actually published. That theory is based on another theory I have about geometric resonances of DNA, and I don't really have time to go into that in too much detail, other than to say that the DNA and biomolecules in general can exist in different geometric conformations. Okay, so having said all that, I have only 10 more minutes, so I want to I've basically said this, and I've said this, and now I want to talk a little bit about phase conjugation, which is another mechanism for converting higher dimensional energies into ordinary energy. And here on the left, we have a regular mirror, which can bounce light off of it, and that the light that comes in and the light that bounces off of this mirror is similar. But in a phase conjugation mirror, the light that is reflected off of the mirror doesn't goes back to source. And this is the terminology they use. You can see the picture here. This is exactly what we talk about in the spiritual world, that energy goes back to source, that we need to bring our consciousness and our energies back to source, back to God. And in the physics literature, when they describe phase conjugation and they describe the light energy, so the input energy is normally a laser beam, and they describe the reflected light that comes back off of this surface as sorry about that, as time reversed virtual energy. Well, time reversed and virtual are two words that apparently the physics people are okay with, describing higher order energies. And as I said earlier, this phenomenon of phase conjugation is reversible. So it can convert 4D into 5D and 5D into 4D. So phase conjugation. So then the question becomes, where is the phase conjugation mirror in the body? And there are lots of theories that are out there. And my particular theory is based on the last one, the quantum chemical properties of biomolecules, because there have been two publications demonstrating that certain biomolecules that contain porphyrins do in fact exhibit phase conjugation behavior. And that is the point, that this phenomena can occur in the physical body. So it's not just theory. I mean, it's not just physics. This phenomena occurs in the body as well. So here's a porphyrin, complex porphyrin structure with, they usually have a cationic metal in the center to create this kind of special effect. And the function of porphyrins is interesting and having to do with a semiconductor and electron tunneling. So it has kind of like quantum properties as well. And this is a particular interest to me. And I published this theory that phase conjugation can act, as I have been talking about for the last 20 minutes, in this context, and that it is the holographic interference patterns on the phase conjugation mirror, which allows energy to be transmuted, decoded, modulated, transformed, and brought to higher dimensional reality. Okay, so having talked about that, I do want to talk a little bit about my own research. I'm going to run out of time. So geometric patterns are as associated with yantras and mandalas are another way to raise consciousness. And geometric patterns, it turns out, do emit an energy of their own. And this is what I call subtle energy. And here's a reference to that in the biology literature, talking about higher order molecular organization. So there is some rigorous scientist associated with this idea, but I want to talk about my own research and how these kind of energies affect DNA. neuronal network. Here's some nice pictures to show you of these kind of geometric patterns. But specifically, I want to talk about how these patterns can affect the body. And here's a quote from the book by J.J. Hertak, which I quoted preliminarily, and basically saying that an evolutionary shift can occur as a result of shifts in the grid. The geometric patterns themselves shift and can actually cause changes in our consciousness. Okay, so here, finally, we're getting to the experimental data. I only have 5 minutes. I'm going to talk about my experiments with DNA. And I've done several different kinds of experiments measuring DNA synthesis, measuring winding and unwinding of the two strands, measuring the electrical properties of DNA, and measuring the frequency spectra of DNA. Obviously, in 5 minutes, I don't have time to talk all about this, but the fact that DNA can act as an antenna and be sensitive to these various forms of subtle energy, I actually proposed back in '96, but Martin Blank published it in a real journal back in 2011. So there is some scientific rationale for this. These are, okay, so here's a specific experiment that I'm going to talk about where I actually place DNA in a test tube on top of these two-dimensional geometric shapes and inside a three-dimensional shape like that. And I measure before and after. And here's an experiment where I measure the winding and unwinding of the two strands of DNA, which can be measured experimentally by measuring the absorption of a chromophore inside the helix. The more open and unwound the DNA becomes, the more it absorbs energy, and the more trapped inside of the closed conformation, the less it absorbs. And here, pattern number 1 and pattern number 2, just to refresh your memory, these are two-dimensional patterns, the golden mean spiral and a very complex triangular shape. They do, in fact, change the conformation of DNA. And what's interesting, that they have the opposite effect. And I've seen this a lot looking at the effects of various forms of energy on DNA and water, that some energies increase the conductivity, for example, and other energies decrease the conductivity. So, okay, so here's another kind of geometry that I've studied. It's a commercially available, or it was commercially available, machine that you can see, which spins. So the geometric shape on the left actually spins. And you put this thing above your head, above your crown chakra, and they actually did a lot of scientific questionnaires, psychological questionnaires, measuring people's emotional state and even their spiritual state. Believe it or not, there is a questionnaire these days that allows you to measure the degree of spirituality, the degree to which you are connected to source. And these are some of the results. I only did the DNA part, but when this machine actually increases your focus and your emotional balance and mental clarity and all these things, all associated with greater states of consciousness. And my research in this particular situation was to actually measure the DNA, the frequencies of DNA. And here we have the results that show that the conductivity of DNA increases, and this phenomena occurs specifically at 1.4 kilohertz, which itself is a resonance frequency of the DNA molecule. So there is a rather large increase of electrical conductivity at that specific wavelength. Okay, frequency. So I've got a lot of other experiments that I've done with healers, and I don't have time to show you that, but healers, under the assumption that healers generate ordinary electromagnetic energy, yes, but also higher order divine energies. And I mean, you can see that there are various changes that I don't really have time to talk about. Here's another example where the healer can change the frequencies of DNA, which I've already mentioned before. But notice that depending on the frequency, the electrical conductivity of the DNA can either be the same, go down, or increase. So this is a complex phenomena that we're talking about. And I have developed a technique to actually help people visualize what's going on. But in essence, what it involves is visualizing the DNA collapsing into a toroid and visualizing the energy going in and out of a toroid. So that's the 30 minutes. My time's up. So here's my contact information again. And thank you very much for the opportunity to present some of my ideas.